Thank you very much, Shada. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege and honor to be here today. I'm going to take you on a circular journey. I'm told that Indians like circular arguments. Some of you come from Delhi. I'm sure you spend a lot of your time going around in circles. And indeed, India Today's office is in Connaught Place. So I think I'm allowed to make a circular argument today. We're going to end up where we began. With the last over of the recent one-day series in Brisbane in Australia. Last over, you'll recall, was bowled by Irfan Pathan. The captain of India was Mahendra Dhoni. Dhoni went to Irfan Pathan, and we all thought, the last over, Australia 13 to win. He put his arm around him, and we all thought to ourselves, now he's buttering him up a little bit, giving him some confidence. Irfan's figures were about 5 overs, 0 for 93 or something at the time. Instead of which, Dhoni said to Irfan, Irfan, you cannot possibly be so bad that you go for 13 runs in this over. Afterwards, a colleague of mine from India media asked Irfan what he was thinking at that time. And Irfan said, I have seen my father trying to put food on the table and trying to get a partner for his daughter. We all know those are the two great things of Indian parenthood, eh? So, cricket pressure was nothing to him. What is cricket pressure beside that? The person who told me that comes from Bihar, quite eminent now in Indian television circles. The captain, as you know, comes from Ranchi. Irfan, with the background that he has. India has changed. That match and the Sydney Test match were an expression of contemporary India. India has become like Australia. These people come from the same place that Ponting comes from. Launceston. The back of Launceston, Mowbray. That's where the Australian cricketers have come from. They have been blue-collar working cricketers. What I saw an article today about Dhoni said he had a working ethic. That is where we end up on the journey we're taking today. Let us first acknowledge the different roles that cricket plays in our lives. In entertainment, we have one of the great entertainers here. In beauty, we have one of the beautiful bowlers of the game today, artistry. In competition, of course, we all love competition. But it also tells us something else about the culture of our nation. It is the Australian culture and against the Indian culture on the field. You see the news broadcast, there's the international news, there is the local news, there is the weather, there is the business, there is the sport, as if these things are not intermingling. Of course they're intermingling. Everything affects everything else. They all find an expression in you and they find an expression in me. Interested in all of those things. So when we talk about culture of India and the culture of Australia, it is not a false argument to say that these things find their expression on the cricket field. The reverse also applies. Indian cricket reflects Indian culture, tells us something about it. Indian culture tells us something about the Indian cricket team. What I'm going to suggest to you is the Australian cricket culture has remained almost the same for 100 and so years, since Federation in 1901. But that the Indian cricket culture has changed dramatically in the last 5 years to come like the Australian culture. The reason is economic, political, and so forth. It's nothing to do with Dhoni. He is a product of it. Or Kumble, he is a product of it. It goes back in the historical journey to 1850 in England, where there were two great forces in the game vying for the dominance of the game, namely professional cricketers and the upper classes. Now what happened was this. The professional cricketers realized they had some skill to sell. The lace makers and the so forth of Nottingham had said, we've got a skill to sell. So they became professionals. They traveled around on trains, playing against 20 of Bristol, 15 of Taunton, and so forth, selling themselves in professionals, getting paid, playing for money. Meanwhile, the other force of English cricket was the lords and the ladies, the lords more I'll say, at the private schools, taking charge of the game. So these were the two forces. The workers who wanted to be properly paid, in the same way that lace workers were properly paid. Their movement was called the Levellers movement, which had MPs in Parliament in the middle of the 19th century. And the lords taking charge, the headmasters, the vicars taking charge. What happened was, in cricket, unique to England, and uniquely to any other sport in England, the victory was taken by the lords, by the upper classes who ran the game. This had a very significant effect on the game. the game became, therefore, a means of instilling values in its players. That's what the game became, because these players had to go there and over there and over there to instill the same values in the nation. This was what they thought their duty was. So, cricket became something, the phrase "it's not cricket" did not arise by accident. You don't hear it's not soccer. You don't hear it's not tennis. You don't hear it's not golf. You don't hear it's not rugby. You hear it's not cricket. Why? Because cricket uniquely was run by the upper classes. It became a popular upper class game. Now, this had an immense effect on the history of the game in the colonies. Almost without exception, the colonies accepted that upper class British principle and played by that code. Because when you went to India, or when you went to Sri Lanka, or when you went to Pakistan, you took these things with you, and you instilled them because you believed in them. 20 years ago, Sri Lankan players were still asking for, in test matches, were saying, "Please, sir, give me centre." Australian players have never said that. So, there was that great tradition that went through. In all the countries except one, the one being Australia. Australia never accepted that English starting point, that the game was a way of instilling values. To the Australians, the game was there to win or lose. You abided by the umpire's decision. You were played by the rules of the game and to the edge of the rules of the game. It was about that. It wasn't about anything more than that. The noble idea of the game was not deeply rooted in Australia. Why? Because Australia, there was no culture to put into Australia, only to create. They could make whatever culture they wanted to make, and they did, and they have. A very egalitarian culture. Cricket has been played by everyone in that same hard, straightforward, unromantic, unsentimental way since Federation and probably before. You can see how it's played. In India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and the West Indies, where the players would come from the cane fields and conduct themselves like great gentlemen, from the sugarcane fields of Guyana and Trinidad and conduct themselves like great gentlemen, they rose up to this code, the code of the settler, the code of the colonist. India got its independence, you hardly need me to tell you when. Subsequent to that, we've had generations and various movements within India. The first major change was Gavaskar in the 1970s, as it was with Imran in Pakistan, as it was later with Ranatunga in Sri Lanka. Gavaskar was the voice of protest. We're not going to do it that way anymore. We're going to do it the Indian way. You may think he overplayed his hand, but that was his message, a very clear message. The next stage was the stage of Tendulkar, where Tendulkar is saying, I am comfortable. Indian, West, North, South, what are all these things to me? He's a great player and a great sportsman of the game, but he is now comfortable with himself. He's just going along being a great player. What the Sydney Test match was about was the third, and I would suggest final stage of this development of culture. The third and final stage is Dhoni, from Ranchi, and Pathan, and Ishant, and such people. And this wrestler you've come up with who bowled everyone out. And this little moon-faced leg spinner who bowled everyone out. Pakistan used to find these people, not India. Now they're all over the place. Where are they coming from? The villages, the outstations, because there's a good organization in place to find them. So, what happened in Sydney, away from a turbaned off-spinner whose name I'm trying very hard not to mention, and who a turbaned left-arm spinner has told me he has no intention of imitating today. What happened there was an expression of that democratic, Indian, confident, passionate, committed, fearless self. It was a sense of Indian true independence of mind, independence of economy. It was not a protest thing. It was not a thing whereby you say, yes, everything is fine. It was, we're fearless now. Why should we be scared of anything? I've watched my father trying to put food on the table. So what we have now in this world game is two forces, basically, who are rivals but also partners. They don't know it yet, but they talk the same language. They come from the same places. I regard this as a great step forwards in the game. Do you know, it was 2 months ago, everyone was blaming cricket. We can't get the game on the back pages. I write one article, we can't get it off the front pages. And everyone's blaming me. I say, no, it was just something that was needed to be expressed for people to understand a much broader picture. The challenge India faces now, it's not enough to come up against Australia and beat them once in a blue moon, or even quite often. To sustain success requires a strong cricketing culture. It means that when you win the T20, you don't get in a delirious state. You celebrate for a day and you move on because you want to win the next thing now. You expect to win. You don't just hope to win and go wild when you win. Confident nations don't do that. And this now is a confident nation. Dhoni, at the end of that game in Brisbane, stood there quietly watching. He knew 3 bad balls and the game was the other way. He didn't get as carried away. There he is now in Ranchi on his Harley Davidson running around the place. So, but look at Ishant now. Ishant is your challenge in Indian cricket now. Ishant had to move out of his home the other day and he was in tears because people are coming knocking on the door. This is not a nation yet that expects to succeed, but its cricket team is telling you success in this country should be expected and not a surprise. Cricket is saying that, your economy is saying that, your politics is saying that, your hockey team is not saying that yet. We're not here to discuss that. So when we say it's not cricket, okay, things did happen in that particular moment, but I think there are far more significant movements taking place here that are more interesting than some little fracas that broke out in Sydney, where we all got a little bit carried away, myself included. So that is what I really want to contribute at the start of this session today, to say that this is a healthy conflict, that Australia and India need and deserve each other, and that cricket will be enhanced, and that what we have seen now is India becoming Australia, and neither of them really liking each other all that much. But in the end, the egalitarian side, the economic spreading side, the sense of justice in both countries will bind them together. Then it'll be for the others to catch up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharda. And ladies and gentlemen, like Peter said, it's a real honour and a thrill to be asked to come along and attend such a prestigious gathering here in India, and specifically here in Delhi. It's also nice to be back in India, a place where I can finally get recognised. And I'll very quickly tell you why I say that. I was recently in an airport in Adelaide, in my home country, and obviously not quite as passionate in Australia about cricket as they are here in India, but we do get stared at. We do have people come up and approach us for autographs and photos, and on this particular day, I was tired, I needed my own space, I didn't need to be interrupted, and I felt some eyes on me, a set of eyes, and a gentleman, and he kept in my space, and finally he came up to me, and he was annoying me by this stage, I must admit. And finally he came up, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned to him a bit annoyed about being interrupted in my time, and he said with a very excited expression, "Aren't you Glenn McGrath?" At which point I could do nothing but laugh at myself and my own ignorance and arrogance, probably. I said no, thinking he would then realise his mistake, that I was one of Glenn's teammates, and he just shook his head and walked away. It's also nice, a bit daunting to be here in India today, the 15th of March. We all know, I'm sure you've all read the famous Shakespearean play, The Ides of March. Julius Caesar was told to be aware of it. Bad things could happen, tragic events will take place. Well, I have history on the Ides of March. It was 7 years ago today where I stood, and I'll show you a little image here. I stood in the middle of Eden Gardens. Today, 7 years ago, was the day that India stopped our 16-run consecutive win in Test cricket. That there is a picture of me getting my second first ball duck of a game. Out first ball twice in a match. I'm the only Australian ever to do it in Test match history. That's Sachin Tendulkar bowling, and my mindset as he ran in was, whatever you do, don't sweep. Don't play a sweep shot. He bowled it up, I played a sweep shot, and I was out first ball again. So that's my history of the Ides of March. So I'm a bit nervous being back here on this date. But I guess moving to the topic, it's just not cricket. I must admit, walking off that day, I wondered what cricket was. Going from 100 in Mumbai, the game before, one of the great highlights of my career, to the reality check of coming back down to facing 2 balls and getting out to both of them. I'd like to just acknowledge a few current issues that seem to be around, and I guess a bit like Peter's topic or theme, and I guess the feeling I got from that talk there was a positive feeling. I too am taking a more positive approach without disrespecting these issues. Obviously, 2020 and the IPL, what effect is that going to have on world cricket? Umpiring and technology, that's been well and truly spoken about and highlighted. Do we need a greater use of technology? Player behaviour, player standards, behavioural standards on and off the field, sledging, the recent Sydney Test match, and basically the recent whole Australian summer. The money coming into the game, the professionalism, what effect is that going to have on the game? Transnation rivalries, cultures, interlocking, East versus West, is there a divide? And I think the most serious and perhaps controversial issue in cricket, and certainly in the music industry here in India, is will the singing career of Asha Bhosle be resurrected after sharing a song with Brett Lee? I think that is a very big issue that needs to be sorted out. It's a tough one for her to come back from, I think. As long as cricket is played, these issues are going to be around, I feel. I classify them as day-to-day, game-to-game, series-to-series issues that will crop up. It's been going on for a long time. I cast my mind back 20 to 30 years, and it was amazing, well, with great similarity, an amazing similarity, that I realised that some of these issues have been well and truly around, very similar to what we have today. Umpiring decisions have always been debated. There was a great debate, should we have any use of technology? And of course, you know, it's not much less than 20 years ago that we introduced technology into the game, and now we're debating, should we have even an increased level? Sledging has been around. Verbal altercations has been around in cricket as long as it's been going on, be it in jest, light-hearted, or very aggressive. It's been there, and I'm sure it will continue to be. Player payments, that's definitely been a big issue in history, where players thought, perceived that there was more money being made out of this game than what was actually coming back to them as the entertainers or the ones providing the product. There was a great fear, no doubt about it, that one-day cricket, when it arrived, was going to cannibalise Test cricket. It was going to eat it up and push it, if not into the background, even see the death of Test cricket. These are day-to-day, series-to-series, year-to-year issues. I think on reflection of those issues, 2020, one-day cricket 20 years ago, it hasn't eaten up the game. I think 2020 is going to enhance the game. It has the potential, if used wisely and well administered, to enhance cricket at all levels. And it's a vital tool, we think, to somewhere like the West Indies. There's an opportunity for T20 cricket to help give financial buoyancy to the West Indies Cricket Board that then allows them to utilise resource and gives them the funds to make sure that Test cricket survives. I guess looking at those issues, I see those as trees. We hear the saying about often, certainly in Australia we say it a lot, you can't see the trees from the forest. All you can see is a big picture, you can't specify individual things. Well, I'm looking at those as trees, and I want to look at the forest, the bigger picture that is world cricket. And I guess I'll even focus a little bit on India here. Look at the changes in that time frame that's happened in India, not just Indian cricket. Look at the economy. India was a closed economy, and wow, look at it now, watch it go. Who would have heard of a mobile phone 20, 30 years ago? I believe, I was recently told, 750 million handsets in India. Amazing strides forward in short space of time. In a cricket sense, the Australian tours of India, I'm thinking back to exactly what years they were, but I certainly know that the Australian tours of India just weren't televised back into Australia. My memory, or the only sort of images we have, are grainy images of the Madras famous Tide Test. Very grainy images of Dean Jones leaning over, physically being sick through dehydration on his way to 200. And I saw a grainy image of what looked to me like a reasonably dodgy LBW decision to finish that game off. I can sympathise with the Indians on that last decision. Who knows? We may never have had that tied test, but for, as I say, what I thought was a little bit of a shonky LBW to Greg Matthews. And on that, no cricket coverage of tours to India as early as back as 86. By 2001, the tour that we had over here, that tour that I made reference to, that was the highest rating TV program on cable or satellite TV ever in history, that series. So they're the strides that the interest in India and the way cricket has moved forward and the way Indian cricket is capturing the world. The Border Gavaskar Trophy, in my opinion, is now truly the highest profile test match series. It's the one that I myself, in 12 years of international cricket, found the greatest struggles against India, found the greatest sense of relief, sense of achievement in victory against India. They were the hardest battles, they were the toughest battles. And I think that's indicative of the way Australians and Australian cricket teams look towards India now. And I'll just show you an image here, how I'll represent that. This picture here is, if that can come up there, Perry, thanks. Thinking back to 2001, again, that series in Mumbai. We played the first test in Mumbai, and that image there is me scoring 100 in that test in Mumbai. I didn't bring this up just to stand up and tell you what a great cricketer I am. It has relevance to what I'm about to say. The expression there is one of satisfaction. That's 100. That was my 16th test match. It was my second test match 100. We hadn't lost a game up till that point. Cricket life for me in test cricket was going really well. Pretty cruisy, everything was good. So that's 100 in Mumbai in 2001. I looked pretty happy there. That is an image of me scoring 100 in 2004 against India in Bangalore. In 3 years, and realising what the challenges that we faced whenever we played India, both home and away, that's where it got to, where I scored 100. And far from being content and happy, that was one of the great achievements of my career. That was a tour that I was able and fortunate to captain. But that moment, compared to the other image of when I scored the 100 3 years before, showed the way I think the psyche of the Australian team and players, and certainly me as an individual, changed. And that was a huge thrill. Not taking anything away from the Mumbai 100, but that, to me, was one of the great days of my career. With that great rivalry, we're always going to get a lot of desire. We're going to get sparks flying, as Peter mentioned. We're going to have cultures clashing. We're going to have a lot of energy going into, young players representing their country, trying to win. Again, Peter mentioned the varying cultures. Once they collide with great intent, there's going to be sparks flying, and so there should be. I think in an ironic kind of way, sledging and verbal jousting, I think they're quite a compliment to your opponent. It's an acknowledgement that you fear them. It's an acknowledgement that you feel threatened by the challenge that they pose. It's a weird kind of way to do it, but you're almost showing each other respect. In the intense contest that is Test match cricket, there are no saints. I had a off-spinning friend from Punjab region who recently made reference that I am no saint on the cricket field. And believe me, I'm not. I've never proclaimed to be one. And there shouldn't be any saints out there. It's hard fought. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of desire, and it's an emotional game. Yes, there's no doubt there's a responsibility for players to know not to cross the line, as we like to say, but I too think there's a great responsibility for administrators and even the press to make sure that they don't try to over-regulate natural behaviour and try to push away the emotion from cricket that we see on the cricket field. But let me just wind up by showing you something that was sent to me by a young fellow who I think this message that you're about to see typifies where cricket is and the impact that it can and is having around the world. This young boy, a 10-year-old family friend of mine, has been a great supporter of my cricket, and his family have supported my cricket throughout the whole career. My final test match in Adelaide against India just over a month ago, on the last day of the game, this young fella got the opportunity, he came into the change rooms and got to meet my teammates. He spent the 5 days of the game at the game each day, ran out onto the Adelaide Oval and had a fantastic day. 2 days later, he sent me this little package that he did up himself, a 10-year-old boy, and it's titled The Best Day of His Life. Now, when you watch it, I just ask that just ignore the fact that it's a young Australian boy talking about the Australian cricket team. If possible, while you watch it, just imagine it may well be a young boy from Ranchi. It may be a young boy from Leeds in England. It may be a young guy from Kingston, Jamaica. And that young boy will definitely be supporting his national team of whatever country that is. So if you can just keep that in mind, obviously this is Australian-based, but just have a look at this impact on what I think cricket's having. Thanks, Perry.
This is the clock upon the wall. This is the story of us all. This is the first sound of a newborn child before he starts to crawl. This is the war that's never won. This is a soldier and his gun. This is the mother waiting by the phone, praying for her son. Pictures of you, pictures of me, hung upon your wall for the world to see. Pictures of you, pictures of me, remind us all of what we used to be. There is a drug that kills it all, blocked by the governmental war. We are the scientists inside the lab, just waiting for the call. This earthquake weather has got me shaking inside. I'm high up and dry. Pictures of you, pictures of me, hung upon your wall for the world to see. Pictures of you, pictures of me, remind us all of what we used to be. Confess to me every secret moment, every stolen promise you believe. Confess to me all the lies between us, all the lies between you and me.
So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hanging on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right.
As I say, I don't think it matters what country that young boy's from or what team he's in supporting. Cricket is having an amazing influence and providing a great deal of inspiration, particularly to our young across the world. Obviously, the way we utilise that enthusiasm and encourage it going forward is of vital importance. I guess it just reminds me, I heard Mr. Mukesh Ambani speaking yesterday here at this convention, and he was talking about Indian business and the economy, and that a requirement for Indian business to develop a one world vision, not just focusing on itself. I think this rings true, very true in the cricket world, and not just the BCCI, it's Cricket Australia, it's the England Cricket Board, it's all the nations, and in particular the ICC, if we want to keep this game unified and heading in the right direction. Just quickly like to thank Arun for the chance and the opportunity to come along to this great gathering and acknowledge Bishan Singh Bedi. It's fantastic to catch up with you again. One of India's greatest spin bowlers, and Mr. Peter Roebuck, undoubtedly one of the world's best cricket journalists. Thank you very much.
It happened in Pakistan once, and I wasn't playing that game. Sunil Gavaskar was leading, and something untoward happened on the field between Sunil and some of the Pakistani players. Sunil decided to kill the game. Now, I was miles away from that event, having a swim in a friend's house. In the evening, we had a reception by General Zia-ul-Haq in his presidential palace. And fair enough, General Zia-ul-Haq was well briefed that these Indians are bloody spoiled sports. They haven't come here to play cricket, they're only whining and whinging. They're bad sports. Now, General Zia, we were all lined up, and this is our first meeting with General Zia. And on the wooden floor, the sound of his hoofs was pretty loud. And tuck, 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 from a distance of about 5 yards, he said, "Bedi Sahab, aapne declare kyun nahi kiya?" I said, "Excuse me, General, I wasn't even playing this game." "No. Had I been the Indian captain, I would have declared at 12 o'clock. He said that, shook my hand, and then moved on a bit. And I yelled back at him, and I said, "Excuse me, General, I don't think I would have declared at 12 o'clock. This is terribly delicate timing for me." And he had a massive laugh. Massive is a word. The whole Pakistani media got after me. "What did you tell our general? This bugger has never laughed like this in his lifetime." I'm trying to get hold of some memory which is long dead and buried. Public memory, as we all know, is very, very short. We've heard a great friend, a great cricketer, and a great gentleman, Adam Gilchrist, and then we heard an Englishman, Peter Roebuck, who sounded so much un-English today. But they have done the job because they're very much in touch with the game. I am not so much in touch with the game, so I have to seek the help of some other time gone by. Please bear with me, have some patience. And the moment I see somebody yawning, I'll say thank you. I'd like to take you back to a time when India beat New Zealand in a 5-day test match. In those days, Indians used to get 50 rupees a day for a test match. But Indians won the game in 4 days. The Indian board deducted 50 rupees. That was the incentive of winning the game in 4 days. And mind you, we had some of the greats like Vinu Mankad, Paulie Amriga, Vijay Hazare, Pankaj Roy. They were all playing this game, and not a soul stood up to that nonsense. Many years back, later, I was having a conversation with Sir Donald Bradman. And this is the time when one hulk of a man called Kerry Packer was raising his ugly head in Australian cricket, early 70s. We had just finished our Australian tour in 77, 78, reasonably well. We had won all our state games, and 2 out of 5 test matches. So I wrote a letter to Sir Donald Bradman requesting him if he could do an article for me for my benefit brochure. Sir Donald Bradman was a very prolific letter writer, and he always used to write with his hand, never use a typewriter. So he wrote me back saying, Bish, I just heard a rumor that you are likely to join Kerry Packer. Is there any truth in it? Because if there is, I'm afraid I'll have nothing to do with you. So I wrote back to Sir Donald saying that I have refused this offer once in England, once in India, and once in Pakistan. So there is no way this man is going to fire his financial guns on my shoulder. So Donald Bradman then went on to write an article for me, which is still a treasure for me, covering the performance of left-arm finger spinners on Australian soil for the last 100 years. Now that, to my mind, was perfection at its best. And mind you, Sir Donald Bradman refused to turn a professional. He was never a professional. And he guided the destinies of Australian cricket for close to 5 decades. He was definitely my favorite idol. I used to communicate with him a lot. We would exchange letters. But there's one-way traffic involved somewhere when I claim that I have read so many books on Sir Donald Bradman, because the literature, cricket literature, is full of Sir Donald Bradman. I wish it was the same for Sir Garfield Sobers, but that's not the case. Sir Donald Bradman was the ultimate in world cricket. And I like to think Sir Garfield Sobers was just the same. I'll come rather rapidly onto the modern scene. My friend Adam Gilchrist and many others are waiting with a bated breath when 18th of April, we'll see them do a jig. I call it a jig because what else would you call 2020? When Kerry Packer started his colored clothing, one of the greatest writers in Australian cricket history, Bill O'Reilly, he turned his face from the game of cricket. He said, I'm not going to write on pajama cricket where there is no foreplay at all. I would ask the August gathering here, what would you call T20? PME? We'll leave it to your good judgment. The people who are running this IPL, if I may remind you all, they are using a very, very well-tested formula. OPI and OPM. Now you'd wonder, even Gilly would wonder, whether it's a full toss or a bouncer. OPI is other people's intelligence, and OPM is other people's money. That is what the BCCI is doing right now. And in the process, some of the cricketers, deservingly so, will become multimillionaires. And some of them, not so deservingly, will also become multimillionaires. I'm not cribbing, because I don't belong to this jing bang. Although I would like to ask a very simple question, that even Al Gore, whom we listen later in the day, would have struggled to make 600 crore in just one sound of the hammer. He would have. He would have definitely struggled to make the kind of money which Ishant Sharma has been offered just for bowling not even 100 overs in Australia. I'm not debating the promise. He has the promise, there's no doubt. But it has to be realized. It hasn't been realized fully yet. They say cricket has changed a lot since we played. I wouldn't buy that idea at all. It's still the same. If you look at it, the width of the stumps or the pitch, the length of the pitch is still the same. The height of the stumps is still the same. The weight of the ball is still the same. The width of the bat is still the same. What has changed then? Yes, the attitude has changed. The players, the actors, the directors, the producers, they have changed. But the game of cricket as such, thank goodness for that, remains the same. Which brings me to a governing body called the ICC, toothless to the core. There was a time when England and Australia enjoyed the power of veto. And I would like to think, honestly, that cricket was much better organized then than it is now, because in the present context, it is only votes which are playing the role, and votes, as we all know in a democratic setup, can be sold and bought. My biggest complaint against the ICC, and I'm not going to change my stance at any stage, is that they have done absolutely nothing about the business of chucking. In Indian cricket alone, in the last season, if I may educate you all, about 17 chuckers were pointed out. I'm talking about the last season. 17 of them were pointed out for reformatory actions. Now, whether it's the BCCI or the ICC, both these bodies are not reformatory bodies. They are governing bodies. Their job is to govern the game, not to reform it. I have never known an umpire telling somebody who is bowling a no ball, crossing the line, and telling the bowler, come on son, come back a bit. He immediately calls a no ball. I don't see any reason why an umpire cannot call a chuck a chuck. My own experience is that whatever good that happens to Indian cricket is invariably through providence. Because there's very little planning behind any trip. Now, our guys had a wonderful tour of Australia. Let's forget the sledging part of it for a while. The cricket played was of top quality, but we somehow appeared to be giving more importance to cricket happenings off the field than on the field. And anything which happens untoward, whether it's on the field or off the field, well, you can bet your last paisa that the Indian cricket administrator is definitely at work. For me, cricket has always been my life, and I hope I would be talking about this game even on my deathbed. Not necessarily the money part of it, but the joy that this game has given me in such large measures. And I'm ever so glad that I never fell into the trap of Kerry Packer, or for that matter, ICL or IPL. Perhaps I'm too old for this, but Kerry Packers was a great, great threat to world cricket. It's way behind. Now, some of the Australians who have retired from their own domestic season, it is said that their retirement was precipitated by the emergence of ICL or IPL. I wouldn't like to agree with this. I know Australians in the past also, they have had the courage and the gumption to announce publicly that they would like to devote more attention to their families. That is a very remarkable sentiment indeed. And on that, I'd like to say a very profound thank you to all of you. Thank you, Sharda. Very kind. And I hope I will have a chance to listen to Al Gore. Thanks. Bye.